Welcome, Laura Amazzone, to the Yogini Dakini project. This is our third conversation with Dakini and Yogini all around the world, and I'm very, very happy to meet you. As in the last 10 years, I'm a very special relation with you, even if we have never met in life personally. But we have been meeting regularly since last 10 years in many ways. So I'm really very, very, very happy. And I'm also, because it's a special relation, because one of the most common dear friend, she introduced you to me, that this is Vicky Noble. First interview of this project. Introduce you and say that you are a wonderful yogini and you teach the traditional Kaula tradition of India and Nepal. You also teaches in Shakta Tantra, and you are author of very many articles. So you are really a practitioner, and you are really one of the 64 yoginis of the Durga's emanation, because of your wonderful work. You are helping women all around the world to connect again to themselves. Your wonderful book that I really appreciated a lot is Goddess Durga and Sacred Female Power. And through this book, I had the opportunity to meet you in a deeper way. And this book is now working on a new book on matrikas that will all to introduce us to your new work.
Well, I want to say thank you so much, Louisa. It's really just such an honor to be here, and I just feel the Shakti of our yogini connection. Very moved. It's very, very precious. Like you said, over the last 10 years, even though we've, at least in this incarnation, never met, in person yet, but we definitely have had many conversations, and I too feel so blessed to have your beautiful, really incredible yogini, Hirapur Yogini Oracle. It's just amazing. So thank you. So yes, the love is mutual, and the recognition, yogini to yogini. It's very moving. So yeah, the matrikas have really called me from the beginning when I first was introduced to this path over 20 years ago, and they are the 8 Shaktis, the 8 powers of Ma Durga. They sometimes appear in forms of 7, the Saptamatrikas, and there's a beautiful connection. We can trace them back into the Indus-Saraswati Valley civilization to, a famous seal stone, and even to the Pleiades, the 7 sisters of Pleiades, and then eventually they became the 8, specifically as a mandala connected to the directions, the intermediary points of the directions, northeast, southeast, so forth, in Nepal. And what interests me, they are also part in the fold of the yoginis. So you have the Ashta, the 8 matrikas, and the 64 yoginis, and you have them in your oracle, so beautiful. And it's just been interesting over the years to kind of look at where they appear in the temples, not only yogini temples, but they're very strong in the Kathmandu Valley, and they very much have a relationship with the earth and the folk and indigenous traditions, being guardian boundaries of the village, of the town, not only connected to the directions, but I feel to thresholds of consciousness, different states of consciousness. And they're guardians, they're guides, they're protectors. They are Durga. So they express Durga's qualities of strength, courage, compassion, fortitude, perseverance. And yet what first attracted me to them when I first encountered them in my first journey in the 90s to Kathmandu Valley is noticing them, and they had such diverse expressions. And for me at that time, and just even questioning, you know, just my relationship with myself, with my body, with my menstrual cycle, with my desires as a woman that weren't necessarily traditional and weren't part of the same trajectory. Not that that is a, you know, it was anything wrong with these other paths, but there was something else that appealed to me around the mysticism and the power and this expression that was both wrathful, both peaceful, and sometimes terrifying. And it just, for me, helped, you know, I really related that I'm not just either this or that there was this fluidity of emotions expressed through them. And then when I started researching them, realizing this connection of being guardians of the boundaries, guardians of states of consciousness, and it took me further. And I can say more in a bit about that. But the other piece of this too is the relationship with the yoginis, and that they are yoginis, that we are expressing this consciousness through our bodies, through the bodies not only of females, that can come through men, like your partner, it can come through animals, it can come, you know, through non-human beings. And there's just so much power that they have showed me and kind of guided me to reclaim within myself, especially around illness, my own journey with autoimmune illnesses, and what that has really helped me to recognize in terms of just my relationship with the world, my relationship with myself, with the menstrual cycle, with death. Being, you know, a lot of my work has been around being a priestess of death in midwifery in that sense. So just so yeah, just an amazing, they're a kula, they're a clan. They have their animal vehicles, like so many of the yoginis that we see in the temple. I too feel there's this relationship of the, you know, the power of what their vahana is, whatever the vehicle is, that lends itself to that particular matrika. So Maheshwari has her bull. Maheshwari is very much, you know, they receive these later names that are Brahmanized, you know, that are related to the Brahmanic gods, but they're so early, they're so ancient, and they had other local regional names. But Maheshwari with her bull, so the qualities of endurance, perseverance, patience, you can feel that. And when you to them, in my experience and what I've witnessed and experienced in the yoginis in my kula, who also I thought about them and they work with them, is there's an immediate embodiment. It's beautiful. And expression of particular qualities, and also how to learn to navigate through this mental and emotional terrain. You know, how we work with our anger without repressing it or dismissing it or raging, or how we work, you know, with fear, how we work with envy, and how the matrikas help us to really transmute these emotions.
And this relation with matrikas started for you in particular when you were in Nepal, right?
Yes.
It was Nepal, the land really, initiated you to all this, even if you already traveled to India and South Asia, but you tell very well your story, your book, that about your relation with Nepal, and it's very nice because while we are during our conversation now, a nice light is your face. I don't know if you can see, but there is like the rays of light. Then I think maybe there is the connection. I don't know, but this is the beautiful Shakti. I want to believe that is the it's manifest. She's manifesting in this way.
Yes.
So, and you can tell us a little bit about this relation with Matrikas and Nepal and your story. That it's really very interesting.
Thank you. Yes, let's see. So let me think of which story to share and which part of it. But when I was called to Nepal through a series of beautiful synchronicities, very powerful synchronicities when I was backpacking through Southeast Asia in the 90s, and some of these synchronicities, just meeting another traveler and them saying, you have to go to Nepal. And on me saying, well, no, not this journey. That's the next journey. There's too many goddesses to remember, to know. And I was studying goddesses. I was familiar then with many goddesses in many cultures, but it just became very clear through dreams that I had, through others had, that I needed to find my way to Nepal. And my beloved grandmother, who was like a soulmate to me, she had died shortly before I had actually left my travels and gone home to midwife her death, and then went back to Nepal. And that was for the first time when I arrived in Nepal. I met this shaman, a Tibetan shaman actually, Lamo, and participated in different healing rituals, which really opened this journey. And one of the healing rituals that you had to make 9 different offerings. And so these numbers are very significant. The 7, the 8, the 9 have layers of meaning. And there's also the Navadurga, so not to confuse everyone, but there's different collectives. And the collectives, really what I find, they really speak to the power of us in community. And specifically the powers, for me personally, I've experienced amongst women. And the diversity, the different skills we have, the different gifts, and yet there's this unifying force, the Shakti, that unites us all. But back then, I was just introduced, to making these 9 offerings. And after this very powerful fire puja that was performed, also not only in helping me with the grief around the loss of my grandmother, but around different menstrual illnesses that I had. Cysts on my ovaries, endometriosis. And so I was really experiencing very profound healing through this shaman, this female shaman. But she instructed us after we made our 9 offerings to take 9 offerings from the puja and go to a crossroads in the middle of Kathmandu, in the city with the traffic, whirling around. And I made my way there with my offerings, and there were little stones, and discovered they were the matrikas. And the matrikas at these crossroads, not only on this physical plane, but it's a crossroads, it's a sacred site, a sacred pita or seat of the mother, that I feel really the divine and the mundane or the everyday are intersecting. And something happened in this exchange. And just traveling around, walking around, noticing them everywhere, noticing these beautiful figures with multiple arms, their different vehicles, holding up the temples on the struts or appearing on the tempaniums. And there was Durga, always in the center, with her tiger or her lion, and then surrounded by these Shaktis, by these goddesses. So I became very curious, but you know how these things work. They claim us. So I didn't even know really what was happening, but a lot was happening in my body, around, my illnesses. And I knew too, as I describe in my book, this young girl, this virgin form of the Divine Mother, who is, thinking of her as the virgin, meaning whole into herself, right? But she was this young girl who is an embodiment of Durga. Being at her temple and receiving her darshan really ignited something in me. And I got fever, I was shaking, I was in altered states, and I just knew I had to come back. I had to be there. And when I started investigating the story, this incredible epic mythic story of Durga, I really saw myself in my own personal journey, my own battles in my childhood, in my very violent home, and struggles around, struggles with my biological father, seeing it in the patriarchy, seeing it in other women and men around me and their struggles. And it became, since then, this lifelong, quest, dedication, devotion, and also a deep feeling of being at home, deep feeling of remembering what I am, who I am, and really a deep desire that of wanting to share this. And especially because for me at that time, there was such permission to grieve. There is such permission from these goddesses to be angry, or to embrace my fears, or to look at other afflicted emotions that limiting me in some way, or were not maybe even being expressed through me so constructively. And so they all, they've taught me a lot. They've taught me so much on so many different levels. And I think they're I think it's fascinating that in over 20 years since I've been working, that your oracle has come through, Stella's beautiful oracles come through, that there's such an interest by so many.
I read on your book, but I just wanted to know from you. And so with this experience in the Shakti since so many years, and this Kaula tradition of the ancient and secret path of the Yogini, if you should say who is the Yogini today? If you have to give a definition of a Yogini, that because now you have been meeting and teaching to so much women, and there are two processes. One is for yourself, and at the same time you are also the priestess and the teacher and the healer for so many women. So if you should say to your words and through your experience, who is a Yogini today?
That's such a great question. And just like the Yogini, or just like Shakti, it's always in a process of becoming, always in a process of renewing and changing. But the Yogini, it's impossible to define, but one way, because there's so many different functions of the Yogini, whether we find them at the boundaries, literally protecting in a physical plane, energetically, like they're described in Nepal as keeping the wild, chaotic, even dangerous forces out of the inner part, of the city or the community. But we can also see that in terms of ourselves, that there's this power within ourselves to remain stable, centered, even in the midst of wild chaos or dysfunction, or we're experiencing with this pandemic, and there's so much racial injustice and all the instability in these times. But let's say in terms of a human being, there's something about her being a vessel, like you said, a priestess, one that's able to bring down or bring, or we don't even want to give this implication that it's something coming down. It's within ourselves, bringing forth the consciousness of the divine, of the absolute, and expressing that on this plane and transmitting through our bodies, whether it's through the teachings or whether it's through writing, dance, or different artistic expressions, to remind us, to bring us back to really what we are, that we are Ma, we are goddess, or we are God, if you don't want to use the female or the feminine form. But I really feel there is something about her being the mother, and whether you're, regardless of how you identify, because she's very much about these qualities of compassion and discrimination and fierceness and embodiment, and being able to navigate for the benefit of all beings really does something. And so just these seminars, It's been such an interesting journey over the years, and just and really praying to the Divine Mother and asking her, please bring those to me who will benefit, who will be conduits, who are ready for this work. It's because it is challenging. You have to confront yourself. You have to look at your shadow. You have to look at your afflictions, your identification with negativity or certain aspects of yourself where you feel victimized or martyr, all of that. And yet also, that being said, it's amazing. It's magical. It's mystical. It's so fun. There's so many experiences we have. I have a joke in my kula that, we say you can't make this chit up. Chit being consciousness. You can't, there's always so much wonder, signs and blessings that come through. And so I'm just grateful too that in these times I can have this conversation with you over Skype. I can teach on Zoom. And it's like we're gathering on these other planes, these other lokas if we can't be physically together. But whether we're physically together or doing this, coming together for a teaching on Zoom, it's very much about meditating together, grounding, honoring the body, very much about embodiment, acknowledging the senses and how there's a direct relationship with the senses and the matrikas. They also guard over the senses. And help to purify, help to kind of free them or unobstruct them from, all the conditioning and so forth. But so we'll begin with a meditation, a grounding. Then generally we're visualizing whatever form we're working with. And we're feeling her in our hearts. We're, opening to recognizing her in the space around us and everyone we know. Even those maybe that our personality selves may not like or have a judgment about, but to see, no, this is her. Again, coming back to the matrikas and the expression of their diversity, they're everything. She's everything. So it's not just singing to her from traditional texts, and also from my master Yogini teacher, who has given so many beautiful sadhanas and given, authorized me to share with these groups of practitioners. Really being in that space and exploring what the different functions, what the different expressions are. So Kali is expressing one thing, Durga something else, Lakshmi something else, Mani something else. And then getting into even more specifics with the matrikas, how we work with, with Brahmani, our arrogance, and how we can go to her to have that transmuted into humility. How can we recognize that we may be artists or writers or poets, and yet it's not our individual selves that's really creating, it's her. We're the vessel. And how to have humility around that. Or with the Vaishnavi, how to come back on balance with the earth, how to look at our afflicted energies of envy, for example, or a greed, a grasping, or a wanting to possess. And so depending on which field of consciousness, and even you could say the masculine, for sure, Ganesh.
Tap a card of the oracle. And I just asked this to you, and it's a way to leave a message to the women or everybody who is listening to us. So,
yeah, what I would like to do, will you take one too? I would like to use your oracle. And,
okay.
And I have, as I shared with you, I think even before this call, I just love your oracle. I'm so grateful for your oracle.
Thank
it's
you
so beautiful and just connecting me back I've been to that temple and had really profound experiences. So connecting me with the Shakti of the yoginis there. And what I do, I pulled out all 8 matrikas. And
so, of course.
Every morning I take an oracle and say, which one of you, who's my sister today? Where do I need to be working or looking? And so if you don't mind, we'll take one of these. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. So a message from this conversation from Amatrika. Chamunda.
Of course.
Chamunda, you live next to a Kali temple, you were telling me, so we have that wild, amazing.
Yes, yes. Yeah, just talking about this before starting, no? That yes, there is this Kali temple just next to my house in Delhi. And I think Chamunda is the queen of the Yogini. What else?
Yes, tell me what else you'd feel about Chamunda.
So, and I have to tell you that when I just drove for 2 years, and when Chamunda was just one of the last cars that I did, not the first.
Really?
She's really the queen of the Yogini, and I'm very happy that she's now between me and you, and she's part of this conversation.
Yes.
Now I want to ask you, what do you think? Which is the message that Chamunda gives to the women?
Yes, I know. I'm thinking, what is her message? Well, one piece I want to say too, the other Yogini who connected us, Vicky Noble, our dear friend.
Yes.
She loves Chamunda too. And so just want to honor, that connection and this beautiful Shakti. She's Kali Ma. She's Durga, she's Kali Ma. The word that keeps coming, and this is in part related to the emotional affliction, is depravity. And the ways that we feel deprived, the ways that we feel so uncomfortable with loss. And I feel she's reminding us that nothing is ever lost, that yes, we can have very intense, shattering experiences, and yet we're always whole, that she's always within us. And she's the Shakti, she's the power that never leaves us. Once we really can when we how do I want to express this? She's a power that never leaves us, and there's a recognition just of this power outside this lens of patriarchy, or the restrictions of patriarchy. She's free, she's wild, and like you expressed, while there is, it's a beautiful place within this lineage of doing these practices in a traditional way, but as yoginis, we go beyond. And, we're both within and beyond. And so a puja, a ritual, a way of honoring her may come through us. And so how do we honor this power within ourselves? How do we come into our centers, even in the face of death, of illness, of difficulty, and also, reminding us to celebrate, our beauty, whatever stage of life we're in, wherever we find ourselves, our beauty in the sense, as we say in Sri Vidya, as wholeness. This not an objectified sense, even the beauty within, the beauty of the yogi that's in all of us. And
I always say that among the 64 yogini, Chamunda is the ones whose appearances, of course, terrific, because she's not beautiful like others, beautiful yogini who are in the temple. But for her message she's the most beautiful because she shows us really life how it is. Without, she's with Chamunda, you cannot see, you really see the essence of life. Yeah. It's just on that border that where everything has its own sense, meaning, reason. So that's why Chamunda is one of the, she is the most beautiful. She is the queen in this way. So there is only only just to honor and to just receive and just accept. I mean, this is Chamunda.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. Jai Chamunda Ma.
Yeah, Chamunda. So, and so thank you very much, Laura. And I think this was a perfect conversation with two people in person, me and you, and two others not in person, but Vicky Nobel, who are our, and above all, among our three Chamunda goddess.
Devi Ma.
So, I mean, we can thank you very much for
you.
this lovely conversation. And so,
thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
really such a blessing. I'm so grateful. Yes. And I look forward to many more. So, blessings of all the matrikas and yoginis to all.
Yes. Jai Ma, as you always